I can't even speak today. Oh my god. Hey guys, it's Kundera, and today I'm going to be doing part 1 of my February wrap-up. As part of the wrap-up, I'm going to be talking about all of my reading stats for the month of February, my rereads, my DNFs, my nonfiction books, and I'm going to be talking about how I did on my wrapped book challenge. So I'm going to start with the reading stats for the month. This month I did not do half as well as I did in the month of January. I only ended up finishing 14 books, and 2 of them were rereads for me. So technically it's only 12 new books this month that I ended up finishing. So by genre, or category rather, I read 1 contemporary book, 7 fantasy books, 1 sci-fi book, 1 historical fiction book, 1 poetry, and 2 nonfiction books. So a pretty good wide variety, except for, of course, all of the fantasy, because you guys know I read a lot of fantasy, so that's kind of expected. For star ratings, I actually did pretty well. I had 5 5-star books. Mind you, 2 of those were rereads, so technically only 3 5-star books, 3 4.5-star books. I had 1 4-star book, 3 3.5-star books, and 2 3-star books, for an average rating of 4.2 stars, which is pretty good. Last month I had an average rating of 4.4 stars, which is a lot better, but 4.2 stars is still above 4 stars. That means I enjoyed myself thoroughly this month. So by age range, I read 3 adult books, 6 YA books, 3 middle grade, and 2 miscellaneous. So they didn't have any specific age range. Usually those are the nonfiction books because anyone could read those. So I read a lot younger than I normally do. Normally I'm reading a lot more adult books, but I only read 3 this month. For page count, most of the books that I read were in the 400 to 500 page count. So I'll put a little thing on the screen over here so you guys can see about how much books I read. I think it's like 8 books were over 400 pages, so that's really good. And then I had 1 book that I read that was over 600 pages. So I'm pretty happy with the page count that I read this month. As for medium, I read 5 books that were physical books and 9 audiobooks. For goals for the month, I always have the goal to read 1 classic, 1 sci-fi, 1 historical fiction, 1 mystery/thriller novel, 1 novel over 800 pages, and at least 8 physical books. So obviously I only read 5 physical books, and 2 of them are library books, so they don't even count. So I only ended up reading 3 physical books from my TBR. So I definitely did not go anywhere near that goal when it comes to physical books. Also, I didn't finish my classic for the month. I'm still currently reading Pride and Prejudice, which was my classic for the month, so I didn't meet that goal also. Additionally, I also didn't read an 800 plus page book this month. The biggest book I read was 620 pages, which is still a lot, but I didn't meet that 800 plus page book. I'm currently reading Mad Ship, which is the book I plan to read for that goal, and I'm on like page 500 of it, so I've gotten pretty far into it, but I didn't finish it. Also, I think I'm going to amend that goal a little bit just because 800 pages, I'm having a hard time finding books with that many pages that are in the kind of the categories that I wanted to read for that. So I'm going to reduce that down to 700 pages. So instead of 800 page books, those are going to be 700 page books for that goal. So from now on, I know I already did my March TBR, but starting in March, it'll be a 700 page book that I'm looking for, not an 800 page book. But I did meet most of the other ones that I mentioned. So for the sci-fi book, I didn't end up reading the sci-fi book that I had planned to read. I did read it. I just haven't finished it yet. I'm still currently reading it, but I did finish 1 sci-fi book for the month, and that was Scythe by Neal, Shusterman, which I will be talking about later. And I did finish a mystery/thriller novel. Early on in the month, I finished Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson, which is a YA mystery novel. So that counts towards my mystery/thrillers. And then for my historical fiction, I actually did read the book that I had planned to read, and that is The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna, which I will definitely be talking about this in part 2 of my wrap-up, so look out for this one because I really loved this one. So yeah, I didn't finish most of my goals this month. I'm still pretty happy with how much I read because 12 books in a 1 month is still really good, and I'm happy with the variety of books that I read. Because some months I don't feel like reading anything and I just end up reading only fantasy, but I still managed to stick in a few books from other genres there, so I'm pretty happy with that. And I did succeed in at least starting most of the books that were on my TBR, even if I didn't finish all of them by the end of the month. There's like 2 days left in this week, and I'm pretty sure I'm gonna finish a lot of those in these 2 days because I'm just so far into them already. They're gonna get finished in these 2 days, and then we can start fresh next week for all of March. So for my rereads for the month of March, both of them were audiobooks that I finished listening to. The first one is Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets by J.K. Rowling, and the second one is Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, also by J.K. Rowling. I loved both of them, and I actually liked Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets a lot more on audio than I ever liked the physical book, which is fantastic. But I love Prisoner of Azkaban. I have always loved Prisoner of Azkaban. It's my favorite Harry Potter book, so of course I loved it. For my unwrapped books, I did have one DNF in the month of February, and that is Natural History of Dragons by Marie Brennan. I didn't have issues with this book. Like, it was a fine book. There was nothing wrong with it. I was just in a deep reading slump for a good portion of the month of February. I was like in and out of a reading slump for the second and third weeks of February, and I picked this one up like towards the end of the third week, and it's not a bad book. It reminds me of kind of like a mashup of Stalking Jack the Ripper by Carrie Maniscalco and Outlander by Diana Gabaldon. It's like a mashup of those two with like a twist of dragons, a little bit less blood and rape in it, but maybe there's more. I don't know. I haven't finished the book, obviously. I enjoyed what I was reading. I enjoyed it. I just was not in the mood for that kind of book right now. It was too slow paced for me, and I just wanted something that was faster paced and something that I could really like dive into and enjoy, which is what I got from some of the other books that I was reading at the time. So I just decided to return the audiobooks to the library, and I will recheck it out later on in the year or perhaps next year. But for right now, I'm just not in the mood for it. For the nonfiction books that I read in the month of February, so both of the nonfiction books that I read were by the Yuval Noah Harari. The first one was Homo Deus. The second one was 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. I really loved Homo Deus. I absolutely really enjoyed it, which by the way, if you've read Scythe, this is a good transition over into Homo Deus, because a lot of the like issues and commentary that Scythe talks about like subtextually, Homo Deus talks about in a nonfiction way, which was very, very interesting, and I really enjoyed it. I ended up giving Homo Deus 4.5 stars. Absolutely loved it. I listened to it on audio. I also listened to 21 Lessons for the 21st Century on audiobook, and I did not enjoy it half as much. 21 Lessons for the 21st Century has a much smaller scope than Yuval Noah Harari's other works, because last year I read Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind, which talks about all of humans' past. Homo Deus talks about potential futures for humans, and 21 Lessons talks very narrowly about the current time period, and I just felt like I knew most of what he was saying, and if I hadn't known it before he said it, a lot of it I got from his other two books, so I just felt like it was a little bit redundant, and then there were just passages in it that were completely like not something I was interested in. So it was still a good book, and if you plan to read only one of his books, this one's probably the best one to read, just because it does use information from the other two, so you can kind of get an idea of what all three books are about from one smaller book, rather than going into the very details of the two larger ones if you don't want to read those. But I didn't enjoy this one just as much as the other ones. If you do want to get into his stuff and you want to read all three of his books and enjoy all three of them, you might consider reading this one first, just because after the other two, it's not as interesting. In my opinion, if you read it before the other two, it could kind of be a good introduction into how he thinks and like how he feels about the world and all of that. So I didn't think it was a bad book, I just think it was a little bit redundant, so I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. So lastly, we have to talk about my unwrapped books for the month. So for those of you who are new here, my unwrapped book challenge is something that I set for myself in October of last year. In the month of October, I had a ton of books on my shelves that I had no plans to read that year. And in October is like right before like the holiday season where everything goes on sale. So I wanted to do like a massive unhaul of books that I just didn't want to read anymore. So I got rid of a lot of books, but there were a lot of books that I still like was very interested in, but had zero plans on reading. So I ended up wrapping 60 books in October of last year, and I challenged myself to pick up one of those books every week and try and read it. So if I read at least 50% of the way of the book by the end of the week, then I can keep the book, and I should be continuing that book and finishing it that month. If I don't reach 50% of the way in that book, I end up DNFing it, then I have to unhaul it, except for one save that I'm allowed to do each month. So just a disclaimer, for these unwrapped books, there are going to be a lot more DNFs and unhauls in this section than there would be in the normal books that I read, just because in general, I'm not as excited for these books anymore because they are books that I've considered unhauling, but these are kind of like the last chance for these books. So if I even have one 4-star out of all 60 books, I would consider it a success. Which, by the way, I did have a 5-star last month, so I'm definitely excited to continue on with this experiment because I feel like I can find more diamonds in the rough. So for the first week in February, the book that I unwrapped is Scythe by Neal Shusterman. This is a YA dystopian, sort of, maybe it's kind of a utopian society. It's kind of like what we would expect going into the future. I call it a sci-fi because it does have some technologies and stuff that we don't have currently that would just definitely be really, really cool. Humans have basically become the master of death and can bring back anyone to life. And so they have this society called Scythe who are basically controlling the population by killing people. Like that's what it is. And it's following 2 characters that are in training to become Scythes. I really, really enjoyed this book. I wish this was an adult book, actually. If this was an adult book, I feel like there are like things like at the ending and different parts of it that I just think could have been really, really cool and complex in certain ways. But I still really enjoyed it as a YA and highly, highly recommended. I gave this book 4.5 stars and I'm definitely excited to move on with the next book in the series, Thunderhead, which I have on hold at my library right now, and I'm so, so excited for it. The next book that I unwrapped in the month of February is The Unbearable Lightness of Being by Milan Kundera. This is a literary fiction book that I don't know very much about because I ended up DNFing it. So I picked up this book in kind of like the time that I was in like the height of my reading slump, or the lows of my reading slump, I guess. And it was like the worst possible time to pick up this book. As I was reading it, I actually enjoyed what I was reading it. I just didn't feel like reading at all. Like the entire time, I just like, I don't feel like reading right now. I don't feel like reading right now. And this book didn't help because it's not a fast-paced book or anything like that. It's definitely not the type of book that I needed to be reading at the time. I didn't give this one enough of a try, in my opinion. I had DNF'd it and I planned to unhaul it at the time, but looking at the other books that I had for this month, this is going to be my save for the month. So I'm going to save this book, and then later on in the year or next year, I will get to this when I'm finally in the mood for it. The next book that I unwrapped in February is The Flame in the Mist by Renee Adieh. This book came at the perfect time. At the time that I unwrapped this book, I was really in the mood for heavily romance-fueled YA fantasy. Like, that's what I wanted, and I know that that's what this author does. She does heavily romance-fueled YA fantasy, and that's what this book is supposed to be. But I hated everything about it. Like, literally hated everything about it. I only got 45 pages into it, mind you. It just had every trope and aspect of those types of books that I hated. I very quickly fell out of that mood from reading this book. Like, I feel like it was such a mistake to pick up this book. I really wanted to like this book. Like, I really wanted to like it. I picked it up at the perfect time to like this book, but I just couldn't. And I'm really sad about it because I really love the dark purple of the naked book. Like, I think it's such a pretty cover. I love the artwork. I like the idea behind this book, but the writing just wasn't working for me. It was too slow-paced, and I really didn't like the whole inner monologue part of this book. So I ended up DNFing it, and it's gonna be an unhaul. Even though I really like how the look of the book is, I really want to keep it just like because of the pretty purple, but that's a stupid reason to keep a book, so I'm not gonna do it. And yeah, someone else will probably pick up this book and really love it, but I've just grown out of this type of book from where I used to be, so yeah, it's not gonna happen. And then for this past week, I picked up Once and For All by Dessen. This is the book that I picked up last year and ended up DNFing last year because I just wasn't in the mood for it. Dessen is an author that I grew up reading, and I was thinking that maybe I was growing out of her writing, but I actually think I DNF'd this book last year a little too early because I had DNF'd this book right before I read chapter 5, and chapter 5 got me really interested in this book. So I'm really enjoying this book right now. I'm not done with it yet. I'm about right there. So it's not 50% of the way done with it yet, but I still have 2 more days to finish reading this book, and or rather to read the next like 20 pages to get 50% of the way into it. I'm pretty sure I'll finish it in the next 2 days anyway, but so far I'm really liking it. I don't have a star rating for it yet because I haven't finished it, but yes, so far I'm really liking it. This is about a girl named Luna who works with her mother. Her mother works in the wedding business, and her mother is kind of like jaded. She doesn't really believe in love or anything like that, but she meets a guy named Ambrose who apparently thinks that she's the one for him. I haven't gotten that far into the book yet, so we'll see how that is, but that's what the back of the book says. I'm excited to see how that turns out. There are like subplots to this book that are not on the back cover that I'm really, really enjoying right now, so I'm definitely enjoying this one. So that is all for the first part of this wrap up. Tune in tomorrow where I'm going to talk about all the fiction books that I chose to read in the month of February. There are some really good ones that I have for this month, so I'm definitely excited to talk about it. I hope you guys enjoyed watching. I post videos every Monday, Tuesday, Friday, and Saturday, sometimes more than that, so consider subscribing. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up to support my channel. All social media links are in the description down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!